Oh, okay.
Yeah. Well, we can do like a quick round of introductions
Yeah.
while we have somebody new here. I can kick us off. So my name's Lisa. I do DevRaw at Databricks now, although very new in the role. So previously I was somewhere else at a startup on an open source data catalog on the metadata management side. And yeah, I help like facilitate the DataOps initiative and things like that for a little bit now. And I'll hand it off to maybe either Vivek or Roxanne. Not that there's anybody else, but to hand it off to. But
I'm Roxanne. I work for the Continuous Delivery Foundation. I'm the one who emailed you. I do all the content and I help like making sure that the SIGs initiatives get visibility. So if you have questions about the CDF, you let me know.
Nice.
I work in data operations and I manage a data operations and an ML operations team. And we support data operations at an infrastructure layer, and that is what I'm very excited about. And I really enjoy all the data ops sessions. Lisa and Roxanne do a fantastic job.
So I guess it's my turn. Um, I'm quite old in this field now. It's been around 24 years roughly working with programming and everything. But when I started my journey, I've done mostly low level work. So hardware level interaction, digital encryption. I'm the inventor of elliptic chaotic cryptography, uh, pioneer of a curve model which fits into the new elliptic chaotic cryptography model. I've been working with C language, the Linux kernel, all of that for quite some time. I was leading the project where systemd was being migrated to Rust. Um, I'm also the CTO of my firm, Virtuous Business Process Outsourcing. We design, we are an accounting and financing firm, but we design custom solutions, custom SaaS level products for ourselves, which we cross sell to our clients. So that's sort of like a 50,000 foot view of what I do.
that's awesome. Yeah, I'm definitely feeling a little bit less accomplished right now in this room, but we're very happy to have you. So
I'm
usually
actually
how
a
these
pretty old soul, so yeah, you might feel like that. I've been playing with computers since I was what, uh, 13 years old. I started writing my first C level program when I was 16. So that's how old I've been working with these things.
Yeah, well, we're very happy to have you join us and to be here today. So usually how these meetings go is we have a few agenda items that we get through, but every other week or so, which is very likely one of these weeks, we have something called a birds of a feather session where we choose a random topic to discuss and then we open it up to the floor and we kind of give our hot takes on it and we just have like kind of some thought ideas around it. And I believe today we are talking about vibe coding for DataOps, which is hilariously one that Dan, aka Sage, brought up because he is very interested in vibe coding right now. And so, really, the topic will be around whether or not coding assistants should be used and what they can be used for, maybe what are their limitations, what examples we're seeing out in the field, things like that.
Let
Awesome.
me give you a heads up on something very interesting. So me and Dan are working currently on a book of vibe coding. The title is not very clear as of right now. We are both struggling with the title. He has a few in mind, but I don't like them, so hence we've not agreed on a title yet. But I'm just finalizing the outline. The basic model is that although vibe coding is good, people have done quite a good work. I've seen apps coming around it, but looking at the security side of it, there are a lot of vulnerabilities which come up with that code and which on face is not visible. But if you get into the root code compilation level, there are multiple issues with purely vibe coded apps. So until unless you don't understand data structures, how they are formed inside the memory, how it is structured inside the memory, you will, although the program would work, but the kind of security and the kind of scalability that you want, you will never get out of it because it was not designed to work on a massive level. You cannot program an ERP on vibe coding. You can probably program an app which can take blood pressure readings, which is fine. But when you talk about large scale programs, for example, you want to manage power plants, you want to manage ERPs, you want to manage inventory level, you want to automate and you want to automate a manufacturing process. That thing cannot be done on vibe coding purely. You need to understand the data structure, you need to understand the business logic. And although vibe coding would help, but it would always come to a point where human intervention and that skill which is required to look at that data structure and see how it is being formed, how it is being stored at a very low level, so that the process itself does not create an issue when it goes on to the runtime. That's my take on it.
Right. Can I get a mic drop in here? That was a really great spiel. I really like it. And I do want to dig into it a little bit more. So please keep that in mind. I think we can go through some of our other agenda items really quickly before we start chewing a little bit on what Raheem has kind of kicked us off with. Roxanne, is there anything in particular that we really need to get through for today? I can ask some of the LFAI and data folks if they want to jump into this meeting. Maybe we'll start with easy and then work from there.
Well, I was gonna talk to Michelle tomorrow and I'll like write to you what I think tomorrow because she knows them as well. And I want to know like if she thinks we need the formality or not. And otherwise we can do that. So yes, the landscape, I want to know what you need from me to get started and when you want it to go live. And yeah, that's it, I think.
Yeah, I think we can start going live with it. We just want to take one project to be able to run through it first before we really set up everything, just so that we have the process down, I think. But timeline seems to be on the meeting minutes, and we can work independently as well so that I can set some time aside to facilitate it.
Sounds good.
Yeah. And if there's any additional promotion we can do for Dan's workshop, so Raheem, Sage put together a workshop for Spark on Kubernetes / Spark on containers, which I think is a really good topic. And I think it would be good for us to promote it. He did it
but
for us.
But it's not ready because there were lots of issues in recording and he is editing it.
Okay,
once it's
awesome.
ready, I will promote it, yeah.
Yeah, he showed me the content. Okay. We worked on it together. It was it I think for a beginner's level, it is quite interesting that the approach that he has taken is I actually concur with it, and with a little bit modifications, he has done some work around it. We were going through it. We plan to go through it tomorrow. Actually, today is Wednesday, right? Yeah, tomorrow's Thursday. We plan to go through it tomorrow. So it would be crystallized hopefully by the end of the day tomorrow.
Awesome. Yeah, and if you ever want to also teach a workshop or host something on us, like even if it's something on vibe coding, we're happy to do that as well. I think that would be good lead up to what you guys are doing with the book.
So my latest project, which I'm currently working on, sort of like a hobby, is the SCON 128-bit encryption, which NIST has just released. So I've been working on implementation of it on the C side of on C language programming to actually write the encryption algorithm, to not write the encryption algorithm, to implement the encryption algorithm that they have created, along with decryption, hashing, and signing of it. So I've been working on it. It's almost done. A few bugs needs to be ironed out. So that is something that I plan to open source. People can use it the way they want to use it without any warranties. It's just something that I hadn't done in a while. I didn't write. I mean, I love encryption. That's why whenever I get a new algorithm or a new something code around it, I always try to figure it out how to implement it. So that's something that I'm trying to do. Hopefully by end of next week, that would be done. I'm hoping if I can iron out a few of the bugs which are bothering me as of right now. So that's something which is new in terms of a project. Apart from that, I've been teaching digital forensics investigations for quite some time. I've been teaching reverse engineering. I've been teaching malware analysis. I've been teaching penetration testing in terms of the usage of tool and understanding of how penetration testing is done, not actually getting into the gray hat or white hat or black hat side of it. So this is something that I generally do. I've been doing it for quite some time, just out of a hobby, and just something of a bird's eye view of what I've been doing in the past last few years, let's say 2 or 3 years.
Oh, awesome. Well, yeah, sounds like really exciting stuff for sure. I think for us, a lot of the things that we talk about relate more into the data engineering and like data manipulation realm for sure, like data pipelining and the ops around pipelining. So typically it lands a little bit higher level, but I think the platform interactions and sort of the network interactions there are quite important for us too, especially on the platform side. And I think as we're working with more big data, like that stuff becomes a little bit more of a bottleneck. So maybe there's some crossover there.
So on data side of it, not exactly data operations, but I've been working with database design for quite some time in terms of implementing low level data management in the memory and optimizing its data structure so that it could be retrieved, managed, and accessed pretty aggressively. So there is something that we are working on with a new kind of a in-memory database called YOLO, YOLU. It's not released yet. It's just between me and a couple of my friends. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to take the concept of Radis and apply it onto a larger data set so that the key value map could be extended to a multi-dimensional array. And from
so
over
is
there,
this a similar concept to what StarRux does then?
I'm not pretty sure about Starbucks. I haven't heard of it. I haven't gone through it, so I can look it up if that's something that is on a similar line. But this is something that we came up individually amongst a group of our friends that let's try doing this. Let's see if this works. So the idea was to take it into a unidirectional array, and then from over there multi-directional, and from over there let's see if we can build a vector database out of it. But vector database is quite far off. We still are struggling with the multi-data, the multi-layered array of the data. Up to the fourth dimension is fine, but when we go on to the fifth or the sixth, things start to get a little out of hand.
Interesting. Yeah, I would definitely recommend looking up StarRocks. I feel like it's also very similar to what this goal is, or at least what this use case is. So StarRocks is also an in-memory database that's used by a lot of catalogs and query engines in order to store metadata in cache. So it might be interesting. I put the link in the chat, but it's star, like STAR, and then rocks, ROCKS.
Okay, I see that.
Yeah, and it's also natively vectorized as well.
Oh, okay. That seems pretty good. It's natively vectorized. Yeah, found it. Okay, so this is what it says. With no compromise. Refresh. So our tool is not a standard SQL. We didn't plan it to be a standard SQL in terms of that. What we wanted to achieve was at a later stage, probably from vector, we want to move to the graph side of it and sort of like create a fuzzy logic between the vectors and the graphs. That's something still on the drawing board. We haven't actually kicked it off yet. We haven't finalized the structure out of it, but that's what it is. So up to some level, we are on the same page, but after a while, we, I think, take a different path altogether from what I see in the README side of it.
Oh, interesting. Well, it'll be interesting to see how yours differs then as you sort of develop it out a little bit more. I think a graph-based like database like this might be really interesting, although I would want to look a little bit more into it for sure.
Yeah. So implementing graph over vectors, and then from a single dimensional to a multi-dimensional, is something which shakes my head as well, because the mathematics is a little bit more complicated than I initially imagined, and even I'm struggling a little bit in terms of the probabilities that are implemented in terms of finding the right path before the path is actually found. So what we were planning to do was, we were trying to prefetch or predict the model. I mean, in terms of, we predict where the data is going to be next. So we try to pre-cache it into the register, just like a regular CPU does, that it prefetches the instruction based on the probabilities that which instruction needs to be executed first. So that's something that we plan to do with it, that we plan to predict the path where the data is going to take place. I mean, where the next call is going to take place, and we try to pull it into the memory first. So it could be, as of right now, I think what we can achieve in the current GPU architecture is up to around 1024 1020 around 1024 bits of data that could be pulled into a single register cache, and then we want to expand over it. So what we are struggling with right now is that, how do we bunch the data structures together so that they don't overwrite, or they don't create a security vulnerability, or they don't corrupt the existing data set without manipulating, without compromising the integrity of the prediction model. So that is something where we are a little bit struggling. That's why the mathematics is a little bit more complicated over there, and we're trying to figure out amongst ourselves how to best code it, or how to best create that relationship.
Yeah, and is sort of the higher level end goal of this, like, what is the use case that you see people using it for?
So what we thought was, this would allow the predictability of the machine learning in terms of predicting the next word, that would become more efficient. That's what the thought is. However, at this point in time, since the mathematics is a little bit more complicated, we are trying to first figure that bit out, and then try to map it on to see how does it trains into a particular model, and how efficient that it makes it.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't know if Vivek, you have anything to chime in on this, because I feel like this is really cool, but I don't know as many, like, I haven't run into this personally yet. That doesn't mean that there's no need. It's just not my realm as much. So
I feel we need Victor for the discussion. Victor is a
yeah,
database.
Victor is the guy who can chime in on this.
It actually turned out to be a hobby project. I mean, we weren't very specifically in terms of we weren't trying to develop it as a product. We just wanted to test it to see how does it feel, and how does it work around in terms of the core mathematics and the implementation side of it. So since I love encryption and I love probabilities, the solving of mathematics comes onto my head, and from over there, these matrices and the probabilities of achieving the eigenvalues of these matrices is something which is quite fascinating for me. And that's how it started up, that this is, I mean, can we do this, can we not do this? So we started working on it. We've been working on it for around 6 to 7 months now, and we've been going a little bit of slow because of my health issues, but apart from that, some level of confusion in terms of the relationship of mathematics in terms of vector and graph, and how to create probabilities around it. That is something that we are still struggling with. Hopefully, we'll find a solution around it in due course, once we give it more thought. But we didn't plan it out that this is how we want to use it. This is what the application of this database was. It was more sort of a project that, can this be done? Can computers actually do this? Can they path can they predict a path before it is called in as a data set, or before this is called in as a query? So that is what the question that we were trying to answer around it. And as I said, we never planned it as a project, or we never planned it as a database. We never planned it as a sort of like a service or anything of that sort. It was just something that was a hobby thing that wanted to test the capability of the system that can this be done.
Right. And so I guess another question is then, and maybe this is naive, but instead of building like your own in-memory vector database that has these sort of graph relationships embedded within them, can you not just take something like a vector database like Milvus or like PG vector and then just query it as a graph instead, like using GraphQL?
We tried that, but unfortunately, we do not have the underlying mathematical relationship and the low-level code of it. And how does it operate onto the CPU register side and directly into the memory side of it? So hence, there are two approaches that we can take. Either we can spend time understanding and learning it, implementing it, or we do it on our own. My guy said, let's try to do it on our own. Let's see how many mistakes that we make and how many problems can we solve. And then we compare our solution to their solution. Theirs is better or ours is better. And if theirs is better, then we can adopt it or probably modify ours to match up to theirs. So that's, as I said, this is not something in terms of a commercial product or something that you want to sell or you want to do around it. It's just something as a test case that you want to see how does it behave overall in terms of the logic being implemented on hardware.
Interesting. Oh, well, thank you for sharing. Well, keep us updated on your progress. I think that this is an interesting place to be. And it's kind of great that you guys have the energy to be able to go through with it. This sounds like a lot of work. So
not really. I mean, most of it is done in my head. And then if we find a solution around it, we just pick up a pen and paper and we try to write it down and see if that works. Sometimes it works, most of the time it doesn't. So it's basically hit and try because it's a completely new terrain. In fact, I've been trying to I've been talking to a lot of mathematical computer science researchers in terms of the understanding the core mathematics. How does it behave? Because they've last time I studied mathematics as a subject and I wrote my paper around it. That was what 21 years ago, and mathematics has evolved quite a lot. So there are new techniques, there are new models available. So even I'm out of sync with it. So I'm trying to get help of computer science researchers who understand numerical computing, and I'm trying to explain it to them. This is what we're trying to do. So they are kind enough to look at our mathematical models and suggest us that this is the approach that you can take. This is the right approach. This is the approach that's going to get you into trouble. So quite a helpful of community that in terms of understanding of the core mathematics. So that's how it works. Writing the code is the last part of it, but understanding the core logic of the mathematics is something which is very important, and that is where the entire program resides.
Interesting. Okay, so for the sake of time, I do want to get into our birds of a feather if everybody else is up for it. So is it okay with everybody if we gear switch into vibe coding?
Mm-hmm.
Roxanne, is there anything else that we really wanted to get through on the meeting minutes before we continue?
No.
Okay.
I have a hard stop, so I will leave, but you all can keep going if it goes over.
Yeah, happy to do that. I also have a hard stop at like 9 my time as well, so we have about like 20 minutes or so. Yeah, I guess we can start with like a roundtable of hot takes. I feel like Raheem gave us a very strong hot take to kind of go into, and so that's going to be a little bit hard to follow up. But Vivek, I know you can do it.
I think the biggest concern, so there are benefits of vibe coding. At our company, what we are noticing is for people who are already staff engineers or well-established senior engineers, using vibe coding is helping them accelerate what they can do and how much more efficient they can get at. And the flip side of that is for people who are very new to programming, who don't have a lot of expertise and experience, vibe coding will create boilerplate solutions which will work in most of the cases. But when you end up with very challenging situations, the developer may not really understand what the code is doing and what are the areas it fails. As simple as maybe the coding assistant will simply generate I don't know, I forget the O notations, but it can generate a search and lookup solution, which will work when you have 100 or 1,000 or 1 million queries. But if that becomes 10 million or 20 million and it's across a 10-day window or something like that, the solution we have in place will become very challenging. And if the individual does not know the difference between different search algorithms and different other things, it can become very problematic. So I have other thoughts, but I want to stop there.
Yeah. So I really like that hot take, and I don't even know if it's that much of a hot take. I feel like it's just a good solid take. But also similar to what Raheem said, I feel like one of the more interesting aspects of vibe coding is that even though a lot of people are using it for prototyping and to build apps on, like, I would say very comprehensive front end frameworks like Python and things like that, one of the bridges I see is that a lot of programming languages have evolved and are adopted based on their like ability to be used by humans, right? Like say something like Python or whatever dialect like Rust. Like I feel like those languages have gained more adoption because people can use them better. Like they're more intuitive for people to use, whereas something like C or even C++ is more difficult inherently. And so people don't want to code in those languages. But it might be the other way around now where it might not, like, and this is good and bad, but I think as vibe coding evolves, the language and the framework underneath that it's actually implementing may matter a lot less because we won't have that barrier, right? And like if I need to work with like a ton of pointers, or if I'm working with like a ton of things that I don't necessarily understand to the underlying memory management of, then maybe I don't have to. Maybe I can just like use it in a prompt and be like, hey, can you make sure that this is all good before I continue writing this program? Maybe that's the way that it goes, right? Because I think previously
Actually, it doesn't.
the manual work
Sorry,
needed to
Lisa,
do that might
I'm
be
chopping you in the
harder.
middle of it. Actually, it doesn't. So
Yeah.
I'll give you a real example. Recently, I hired a boy. He's pretty well experienced, and I don't mind him using vibe coding or AI writing his code. But what he did not understand was that although Rust is very much memory safe, Rust is going to break your program if you try to get out of bounds and try to overlap memory in terms of shared resources between two processes. It's going to break it and it's going to stop it right there. He didn't realize that at the short level time. But when the program ran and the query started coming in, the memory started getting full. At that point in time, the memory buffers overlapped and the entire program crashed. It took us good 8 to 9 hours just to figure out what had happened. It was just 5 lines of codes which was written by AI, and no one could understand how did that work, and we had to get into a debug process of around 8 to 9 hours to figure out where it actually had happened. So this is just a live example as to it is not only for experienced programmers to make that mistake. I mean, it is not only for novice programmers to make that mistake. Even experienced programmers make those mistakes because in terms of data structures, the way data is being manipulated by the AI is sometimes very unpredictable, and it tries to merge two or three static data structures into a dynamic data structure, which causes problems. And that is where what Vivek was saying, that if you try to scale it up, all of that is going to get dumped into the memory. You try to call it in, and it's going to get overlapped, and you're going to get garbage.
Yeah, I completely agree. And also there was a comment by Roxanne that said vibe coding doesn't have the overview of the entire code base. Again, like the dependencies, and there's a lot of duplication of code, like a lot of redundancy there as well. And it's probably not properly optimized for an organization. So I agree with everybody's take. I don't think that current state of vibe coding is very scalable. But the way that I see it as well is vibe coding in my mind has been around for 6 months. Like there is no tool that I would ever expect like to be production ready 6 months out of the gate. But I do think that 2-3 years ago, as like the first wave of vibe coding really concerns itself with like very easy to build applications and prototypes because that's kind of the most accessible thing. But as we get more into these tough edge cases, like we actually have to start building it to accommodate them, right? Like we actually have to train the AI at some point to fit these use cases. And we don't know the holes that exist until this period and this like sort of growing pain comes through. And I do think it will improve over time. Do I think that it will be harder because there's just not as much information to train on? Yes, 1000%. I think that's probably why there will be a divide where like the senior engineers that are already in demand now compared to juniors will only get more in demand later because they'll be the only ones that can actually debug these sort of systems. But generally, like, I think it will improve to the point where it will probably still be able to do like really comprehensive work. But it does take time, like, I think in the grand scheme of things.
So just
I
being the
think I
devil's
agree with that.
advocate here, just food for thought. So today, when we write softwares, generally, even as human beings, we make a lot of stupid mistakes. Like I remember, I was going through Hammond's video, and he pointed out that there's a problem with 7-zip compression engine. And it was a very stupid kind of a thing which was done, and it was there for a very long time. No one noticed it. Now we are using all of that code base to train the AI. When the AI looks at it, it sees that this is executable code, this is the right code, and this is how I learn from it. So AI is not only learning the right thing, it's also learning the wrong thing in the right manner. So when the entire GitHub, when Copilot scans entire GitHubs and learn from it, it learns all the good stuffs, and it also learns all the bad stuff as good stuff, which is then incorporated and targeted into the output that it generates. Now, just food for thought. How do we differentiate between the good stuff and the bad stuff? And how do we tag it to the AI that this is something that you need to do and this is something you don't need to do? Because even as human beings, it's just so much code that we can't comprehend. We can't go through it all together and filter it out.
Yeah, Vivek, did you want to chime in as well?
Yeah, so I wanted to summarize the way I'm looking at what I'm hearing from the both of you is one, the need for trust but verify approach will become even more, it'll be even more in demand for senior engineers, staff engineers who really understand the code. And I think the second thing is all the vibe coding, all the different AI based tools, they are going to not replace people's coding abilities or replace the way where they code, but they will act as a way to augment what you're doing. For example, we may not remember where a particular reference to a very niche line of code is there, but I think by using vibe coding agents, we may be able to help create scaffolds for test cases and helping us get better at what we are doing by sort of simulating all possible scenarios, number one. And number two, I think it'll help more in coming up with POCs and MVPs very quickly to see, hey, okay, what would the finished product look like? What would the outputs look like? What would this look like? And I think that will help us determine, okay, is this the direction we want to take? If we do this, what will be the trade-offs? So I see it augmenting what we will be doing. And I fully agree with what Rahim was sharing earlier in terms of poison data. That is what we used to refer to it in the machine learning world, where if your training data is bad, then the model does not know good or bad. So it can lead to different kinds of like prompt injection and situations like that. So I think then teams will have to decide, do I want to spend a lot of time teaching this AI when we do not know what the final long-term outcome is going to be like? Or do we want to just spend and do it the old-fashioned way where we sit and we write the code and then just use AI's help for just the test cases?
Yeah,
And
I
these are
also
not
feel like
good tools to run through. It's a very good hypothetical model that Vivek has put through. And I think between all four of us, if there is a possibility, we can probably build a test case around it and see how it works. Because small models are very easy to train nowadays. And probably sort of like tagging the data out, it might take us a month or two, but it could become a good a model to present in front of the world that this is what we have done and this is what the output looks like. Maybe it's the right way, maybe it's the wrong way. We don't know. It's just something that we're exploring.
Yeah, I think too, like one of the tough things about vibe coding is that it's too easy to complete like an entire application. Like I actually think that's one of the issues with vibe coding is that it's very easy to deploy something and not think about it twice. Whereas like when you have something that's so easily accessible in that way, you lose a lot of the basics. And I was talking to somebody else about this recently where like, I don't know, there was a viral like blog post of like Taco Bell, like, you know, goes down because their like AI like chatbot just like made all these wrong decisions and somebody was able to exploit it to order like 10,000 burritos or something. And in my mind, the way that I saw a lot of the comments on that were, you know, AI sucks. Like AI is like never going to be like people put too much trust in it. But the way that I saw it as well was, this is exactly what DevOps is for, is it not? Like, it isn't the whole way that we should be approaching vibe coding is by breaking it up into these small, simple tasks that it should take first, and then growing those use cases out with tests. And for some reason, we're just vibe coding these entire systems and then just throwing it into the wild. And then when it breaks, we're like, oh, why did that happen? AI sucks. It's like, no, not really. We just didn't roll it out correctly. And so there needs to be like a DevOps flow for vibe coding, right? Even if you're vibe coding the flow yourself, I don't care. It just has to be something. And maybe that is the better use of vibe coding, is instead of using it to write your core logic, is instead using it to write like your deployment systems, right? I don't know if anybody wants to chime in on that.
So I have just 2 cents on this. So you're right. Actually, DevOps can actually help, but one of the biggest challenges that we need to write the right test cases. If you write basic test cases for our system or basic test cases for our application, it's all going to pass. But if you're going to go roll up your sleeves and write down good, difficult test cases that test the system to its brink of its threshold in terms of its data integrity and its data vulnerability, both sides of it, then that CI/CD pipeline or DevOps would actually make more sense. If you're doing just basic testing or application testing in terms of input validation and output validation, it might not work. But a thorough test which actually tests the data structure itself, along with stress testing, that is a CI/CD pipeline worth having.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that the way that we're currently approaching testing is not dynamic enough, and it's not difficult enough to be able to actually provide relevant checks for these pipelines. And I think the knowledge gap is a little bit too large too, between a lot of these DevOps engineers and the AI ML engineers, to be able to appropriately test them. And I think also, just on the other side of things, maybe AI ML engineers don't necessarily understand what a good test is, right? Because that hasn't necessarily been part of their wheelhouse. And then also, Roxanne mentioned this gap that can occur if you can't code well, but then you vibe code, wouldn't it become a crutch, making the gap bigger between senior and junior? Yes, absolutely, like 1000%. And that's what I think we're seeing in the field right now, is everybody, like even non-engineers, which is kind of the point, right? Like, is now able to write, like a lot of product managers can now use it to prototype. And arguably, too, I think there's a lot of folks out there who maybe even vibe code better than actual engineers, because they understand prompting a little bit better, because they're verbose with their prompts. They understand how to write instructions much better than maybe even a junior would in some cases. And so a lot of seniors are also using it. It's just, when those things break, do they then know how to actually either use AI, or they themselves go in and fix a lot of the issues that arise? And again, there's a difference between just being able to do it and having an understanding of the system, which is very hard and not rewarding in this day and age to do.
That's true. I agree with you. That's completely true. Understanding a system end to end. Before joining on to this call, I was on another call about our internal system that we're building, and there was so much confusion around it in terms of basic business logic that I personally had to join in to make sure that the dev team understood what the business guys were saying, and the business guys should understand what the dev team is saying in terms of the system end-to-end applicability of many relationships on so many levels, that even our very senior developers were trying to scratch their heads what the hell is going on.
Yeah, and there's also the question too, if arguably, should that understanding of the system be bottlenecked at a person? Okay, now we're going to get a little bit meta, but should it also be an AI that maybe has that understanding of the system, so that it can be in charge of coordinating everything, right? Like that, but also that might be the same thing. Does it even really truly understand the goals of the system, or is it just regurgitating what it hears?
I find that very scary for some odd reason.
Yeah,
I find that very scary for some odd reason, that we're letting go of our control to an autonomous engine who's going to decide what's going to happen next. I just find that very scary.
I have 2 comments on that. One, what Lisa shared earlier about, okay, I forget what it was, but I know what I wanted to share. I think there's a need to help everybody be on the same page and not portray AI as the panacea for all our problems or making it like a solution. Because I think that is where the biggest gap happens, where sales teams and product teams, they tend to, they want their product to be sold. They say that this can do everything, everything, everything. But it's the DevOps engineers and the actual programmers and the people in the databases, they're the ones who actually understand that, hey, there is no need to worship it. There is no need to hate it. It's a machine. You train it a certain way. That is exactly what it does. So I think somewhere at that, I don't know if it's considered a meta level, but I feel like it's a very important thing that organizations have to agree on and come together, that it's a machine. It will do exactly what it is told. Maybe you don't understand the black box completely, but it is maths at the end of the day, unless you're talking about quantum, I don't know, physics or some other realms where our Newtonian laws don't work. But I think that will really help people realize, it'll help them not worship it and not hate it at the same time, but look at it from a very practical lens. All right, this is what I asked it to do, and that is what it is exactly doing. And if it's not doing, the onus should be on dev teams and the users of it to really go in. I think empathy. I think we need to develop more empathy. And the second thing I wanted to share about was like code quality issues. What Roxanne and Rahim shared triggered another thought there is most of the vibe coding. I do not know if there is access to direct model, I mean, invoking models directly and things like that. But I think for the most part, LLMs are designed, packaged, and for security reasons are going to be hosted within a company's VPC. So that means that that particular model may not always have access to the latest code. So that can potentially result in code quality issues. And I'm going off on a tangent here. And to the other point, which Roxanne posted in the chat, I think the other risk of that is if we allow direct model access or invocation, there is a possibility that that can go around guardrails. Maybe there's a model where, for example, if on ChatGPT you go and tell it like, hey, tell me how to build a nuclear bomb, maybe it'll tell you like, get out, no, I'm not telling you, or it'll report you to the police. But if you were to directly invoke the model instead of through the abstraction layer, which may have guardrails in place, you directly invoke the model. That model can be trained, like Rahim was sharing earlier, if it does not know what is good, what is bad. So I think with that poison data and with the poison model, it can lead to, it will open up more risks to the company, because now you have an AI model which more or less has access to all of the company data in a hypothetical situation. So you have something which you don't understand completely, having full access to your secure handling required data models. And at the same time, you're giving it access to call something outside and interact. So I think it can lead to a lot of what is it called? GRC, compliance related challenges. So that's where my brain is going.
Compliance related challenge is the least of our concern, because if this model starts, I mean, just thinking out of the box, probably going a little bit over my head, but if the model start taking control of our regular decision making stuff, I don't see an end to it. And there's one biggest problem. It is not deterministic mathematics. These models are based on undeterministic mathematics, and that is why we have to train the model rather than give it an input and output that this is how the input would calculate into the output. The input is given and the output is given, and the fuzzy logic between is something that the model understands on its own. That is how the structure is designed. It's raw probability to a level where even I was amazed that the kind of complexities in terms of probabilities is as good as quantum level complexities in terms of entanglement. That's the kind of complexities that's the kind of complexities in terms of probabilities we're looking inside these models. 4 layers, 5 layers. We don't know which path the data is going to get trained. So, having said all of that, the idea comes into the place where the model is not deterministic. It's not something that we tell it to do and it's going to do it. We're going to tell it something and it might learn something. Now, I was going through a documentary some time ago, and I don't remember which channel it was on, but it showed people, these chat GPTs and Gemini and all of that, they have people who converse with him. So these models actually talk to these people and they try to answer their queries. And one of the questions that came out of it was, why is it bad to kill and eat another human being? How do you answer that question? What kind of an ethical dilemma do you come into place, and you answer that question? So people were starting to get nervous who were trying to who were trying to answer these questions of these models. Most of these people belong to business process outsourcing companies in Africa, in Far East Asia, even in Pakistan and in India. So that's the kind of things which are happening at the background of it. So it is not deterministic. That's the story or the crux that I'm trying to make. It is completely undeterministic, and we cannot predict how the model is going to respond to a particular thing if you put down all the guardrails around it. Like, for example, the DeepSeek 780B parameter model, if you just download it from Hugging Face and you run it on a local well-built processing engine, a desktop engine with a couple of A100 graphics cards and a good Threadripper processor, you're going to see some things which are completely weird. I mean, this is something that we have tested in our own labs, and the kind of results that we got were shocking. I mean, all guardrails down, it gave us schematics of anything and everything that we asked for. It gave us shell code. It looked at programs, analyzed its weakness. Somewhere right, some of it was correct, some of it was not correct. Some of it actually gave our gray hat testers the area to look into which they were not looking into. So these kind of things are, again, summing all of it up, it's not deterministic, it's completely probabilistic.
All right, well, we're at time. Okay, last words, quick round. I think that was an awesome one to end on, because I think that it really outlines just how hard it is to deal and manage with these systems, right? That we're not dealing with hard-coded systems, we're dealing with very dynamic systems, and we're working with a lot of statistical edge cases here. Vivek, last words?
Looking forward to the next discussion.
Rahim, last words?
Absolutely. Really looking forward to the next discussion. It was fun. I mean, it's sort of a conversation like we have once in a month, probably with my friends who come over for breakfast, and then we sit down up to lunch and we have these conversation on whiteboards and papers, and the entire room is scattered off. But that's just once a month. This is not something that we do on a weekly basis, but this is a lot of fun. This is really a lot of fun.
Awesome. We are on a bi-weekly basis, but we would be happy to have you again, Rahim. Thank you for adding into the conversation. You were very valuable, and we loved your insights a ton. Thank you, and see you, everyone.
You.
See you next time.
Send me an invite, and I'll come in. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.